An aggressive military strategy is also an effective evolutionary strategy. To summarize evolutionary biologist Nicholas Longrich, to war is human, and Neanderthals were extremely similar to us. Our skull and skeletal morphology are incredibly similar, and 99.7% of our DNA is the same. Neanderthals behaved remarkably similarly to modern humans. They built fires, buried their dead, fashioned jewelry from seashells and animal teeth, and created artwork and stone altars. However, if Neanderthals had many of our creative drives, they most likely shared many of our destructive instincts as well. The final battles of the Neanderthals were not waged in roaring armies under waving banners. They were fought in frozen river valleys, in silent forests stripped bare by ice age winds, in caves where soot from long-dead fires stained the ceilings like the ghosts of memory. And perhaps they were not wars, as we understand them, but raids, ambushes, and desperate struggles between tribal bands, fighting not for glory but for survival. They died not in thunder but in whispers. Yet in those whispers lies a story of extinction, of fractured brotherhood, of rival Neanderthal clans tearing each other apart when cooperation might have saved them. In the last 20,000 years of their existence, Neanderthal populations across Europe grew fragile, genetically isolated, and increasingly tribal, until one by one they were replaced, sometimes by modern humans, sometimes by other Neanderthals. What caused this shattering of unity? The answers are now emerging from the deepest layers of ancient DNA and the soot-crusted caves of southern France, and they hint at something far darker than we imagined. Not just the replacement of one species by another, but internecine conflict, tribal warfare, and the violent unravelling of a once great hominin lineage from within. For much of their history, Neanderthals were masters of Ice Age Eurasia. From Gibraltar to Siberia, they occupied forests, mountains and steppe, crafting stone tools, hunting mammoths, building shelters, and even burying their dead. But in the last glacial period, beginning around 70,000 years ago, everything began to change. The clearest evidence for internal Neanderthal conflict may lie in Mesmaïskaya Cave, where two individuals, separated by deep time, reveal a dramatic shift. Mesmaïskaya I, who died around 70,000 years ago, was genetically distinct from Mesmaïskaya II, who lived in the same cave about 45,000 years ago. Mesmaïskaya II wasn't a descendant, but an outsider, her DNA more closely aligned with Western European Neanderthals. How did a new group take over a cave so deep in the Caucasus? Climate could be part of the answer, driving some tribes out and pulling others in. But it's also possible that the local tribe didn't just fade. They were wiped out. Perhaps as competition intensified, one Neanderthal clan replaced another, violently or otherwise. This pattern of replacement, seen not just at Mesmaïskaya but also in other caves across Europe, suggests that the end of the Neanderthals may have come not just from Homo sapiens, but from each other. The idea of tribal warfare among Neanderthals is not new, but it was long speculative. With no written records or battlefield graves, how could we know? Now, genetics and archaeology are rewriting the rules. Tribal warfare doesn't require massed armies or strategy. It needs only stress, resource scarcity and territoriality. Neanderthals lived in groups of perhaps 20 individuals, according to studies from the Altai Mountains. These groups showed extreme inbreeding, sometimes brothers and sisters mating, implying long-term isolation. If each tribe controlled a stretch of valley, a single flint source, or a prized hunting plain, then the arrival of outsiders, whether Neanderthals or Homo sapiens, would pose an existential threat. There are signs that such encounters were not peaceful. Prehistoric combat leaves behind clear evidence. A club to the head is an effective means to kill. Clubs are swift, powerful, and precise weapons, hence Neanderthal skull trauma is common. Another signature of battle is a parry fracture, which is a break in the lower arm caused by warding off punches. Neanderthals also exhibit a high rate of broken arms. Trauma and mortality were especially common among young Neanderthal males. While it is possible that some of the injuries were sustained during hunting, the patterns are consistent with those that were anticipated for a population that was involved in intertribal warfare. This type of warfare was characterized by small-scale but intense prolonged conflicts that were characterized by guerrilla-style raids and ambushes, and fewer battles. According to a new wave of ancient DNA studies, these late Neanderthals were not a unified population, but a splintered collection of small, genetically isolated tribes. In places like Mesmyskaya Cave in the Caucasus, DNA from two Neanderthal individuals, separated by 20,000 years, tells a story of replacement. The later Neanderthal was not descended from the earlier inhabitant. Instead, she was genetically closer to Neanderthals from France and Croatia. Something had happened. The local tribe had vanished, and newcomers had taken their place. Climate instability may have played a role: massive cold snaps, shifting ecosystems, and dwindling resources. But DNA tells us more than just movements. It tells us about fragmentation. At Grotte-Mandrin in France, the Neanderthal known as Thorin was so genetically distinct from his contemporaries that researchers initially believed he must have lived 105,000 years ago. He hadn't. Thorin died just 42,000 years ago, one of the last of his kind. But his people had been cut off from other Neanderthal groups for over 50,000 years. There were no signs of interbreeding between Thorin's group and their neighbours. They had become a forgotten lineage, an echo of an ancient population that had never reintegrated. They weren't just genetically isolated, they were tribally distinct, different, alone. By analysing the DNA of other late Neanderthals, such as those from Les Cottes in central France, scientists found evidence of even more ghost populations, clans that diverged from the main lineage tens of thousands of years earlier and persisted in pockets of land isolated from their cousins. What emerges is a Europe not of one Neanderthal people, but of many. Rival tribes who did not mix, did not trade, and did not share genes or ideas. These were not cooperative bands of cousins, but competing factions, each guarding their territory, their flint sources, and their shrinking hunting grounds. And when catastrophe struck, whether from an ice age, disease, or the first arrival of Homo sapiens, these tribes were in no position to unite. Their social networks were broken. Their bloodlines narrowed to inbreeding. Their extinction was not sudden, but inevitable. At Grotte-Mandrin, modern humans briefly took over the cave around 54,000 years ago, leaving behind arrowhead-like stone points never seen before in Neanderthal layers. Within 1,000 years, the Neanderthals returned, but the archaeological evidence shows a shift. After that, Thorin's tribe appears, socially and technologically degraded, using cruder weapons, withdrawing into themselves. What had happened? Had Thorin's people fled to the hills? Had their men been killed, their women taken? Or had they simply fractured, cut off from kin, nursing wounds no archaeologist could see? One of the most telling signs of Neanderthal fragmentation is their inability or unwillingness to interbreed, even with their own kind. Thorin's DNA shows no signs of admixture with neighbouring Neanderthal groups, nor does it show signs of modern human DNA. In contrast, Homo sapiens created mating networks that spanned continents. The Sungir site in Russia, dating to around 34,000 years ago, contains the remains of several individuals from different clans buried together, adorned with beads and tools. These early humans were unrelated, proof that their groups mingled and exchanged both goods and genes. Neanderthals did not. If they ever had such social webs, they had broken by the end. Isolation breeds inbreeding breeds vulnerability. When diseases came or winters lengthened, there was no one left to call for help. Another crucial factor in this tribal unravelling was technology. Thorin's people, according to archaeologist Ludovic Slimak, made large, crude triangular points, a throwback to older tool traditions. By contrast, the Homo sapiens, who had briefly occupied Grotte-Mandrin, used fine, fluted arrowheads that could be launched at distance, safer, more efficient, and copied across thousands of kilometres from Lebanon to France. This standardization implies not just skill but communication. Homo sapiens were networked in ways the Neanderthals never were. Their innovations spread fast. Their strategies evolved. Their alliances held. For the isolated Neanderthal tribes, there was no such advantage. A tribe like Thorins, even if it was peaceful and wise, could not compete with a fast-moving, socially connected adversary. When they met Homo sapiens, it wasn't just a clash of species, it was a clash of networks. If there were alliances, they did not last. Neanderthal DNA made its way into the human genome. But modern human DNA is absent from late Neanderthal remains. It is a one-sided exchange. Some scientists suggest this may reflect social practices. Perhaps Neanderthal women were taken into human groups, while the reverse, human women bearing Neanderthal children, did not occur, or those children were not kept in Neanderthal clans. If so, the implications are chilling. Neanderthal tribes, already losing numbers to war, disease and inbreeding, may have also been losing their women. Not only could they not recover, they couldn't reproduce. The extinction of the Neanderthals was not a single moment. There was no Pompeii of the Neanderthal world, no sudden eruption. Instead, there was a slow unweaving, each cave abandoned, each tribe gone silent, each flint scatter left behind. Grotto Mandarin shows this perfectly. Neanderthals returned after Homo sapiens left, but they were changed. Their tools were simpler, their DNA was older, their social structure was fractured. And then they vanished. After 12,000 years of holding on, the second wave of Homo sapiens arrived. This time, the Neanderthals did not return. Looking across Europe, the story repeats. Mesmaiskaya, Les Côtes, Vindija, the Altai, all show signs of tribal isolation, fragmentation and replacement. Whether by other Neanderthal groups or by modern humans, the pattern is the same. The archaeological record reveals that Neanderthals' lives were anything but calm. As Dr. Longrich wrote, Neanderthals fascinate us because they teach us about ourselves, who we were and who we could have become. It's tempting to see them as idyllic figures, living in harmony with nature and one another, like Adam and Eve in the garden. If this is the case, perhaps humanity's faults, particularly territoriality, violence and conflict, are contemporary inventions rather than innate. Biology and paleontology paint a grim picture. Far from placid, Neanderthals were most likely superb fighters and dangerous warriors, only surpassed by modern humans. Neanderthals were adept large game hunters, employing spears to kill deer, ibex, elk, bison, rhinoceros and mammoths. It defies credibility that they would have hesitated to utilize these weapons if their families and lands were under attack. Archaeology reveals that such battles were prevalent. Predatory land mammals are territorial, particularly pack hunters. Neanderthals hunted big game cooperatively, just like lions, wolves and Homo sapiens. These predators, at the top of the food chain, have few predators of their own, so overpopulation causes conflict over hunting sites. Neanderthals had the same issue. If other species did not regulate their populations, violence would ensue. War has a subtler impact in the form of territorial boundaries. The fact that Neanderthals encountered us and were not overrun is the best proof that they not only fought, but excelled at combat. Instead, for over 100,000 years, Neanderthals fought modern human territorial expansion. Tribalism, inbreeding, and lack of cohesion doomed them. In the face of crisis, they could not unite. Some tribes, like Thorins, were ghosts of a deeper past, remnants from a more ancient population long separated from their kin. Others were recent, but no less isolated. Their end was not just extinction, it was disintegration, the loss of kin, the collapse of identity, the vanishing of bonds that once stretched across valleys and caves. And when the last tribe fell silent, there was no one left to remember. What does this long, painful unraveling of Neanderthal tribes teach us? That a species without networks is fragile. That isolation, even among kin, can be fatal. That warfare, even low-level, even silent, can break not just bodies, but bloodlines. And perhaps that extinction does not always come from the outside. The Neanderthals did not all fall to the blades of Homo sapiens. Some fell to each other. Others fell to time, to winter, to hunger. But all of them fell alone. In a cold and quiet world, their last whispers faded, and only now, in fragments of bone and shards of genome, do we begin to hear their story. It is doubtful that Neanderthals met the other Neanderthals and chose to simply live and let live. If nothing else, population expansion requires humans to conquer additional land in order to provide enough territory to hunt and forage food for their offspring.